Good morning, and welcome to NC Tech's Focus on Talent webinar, Attracting and Retaining a Sustainable STEM Workforce. I'm Alex Taylor. I'm the Manager of Programs and Digital Experience at NC Tech, and I'm happy to have you all here today. Um, for these, for those who have joined a Focus on Talent session in the past, it's typically led by Andrea Fleming. She's our Director of Talent and Workforce Development. She can't be here today, so I'm filling in, but I'm happy to be here. But if you have any questions about talent or workforce development and the initiatives NC Tech is doing in that space, definitely reach out to Andrea@nctech.org. She can definitely answer any questions you had. And a little bit about NC Tech. NC Tech is a not-for-profit, membership-driven trade association and the primary voice of the technology industry in North Carolina. NC Tech's mission is to foster growth and champion innovation in North Carolina's tech sector while providing a voice for the tech community. NC Tech's membership includes over 650 member companies, organizations, and institutions employing more than 300,000 workers in North Carolina. Our work is in four major areas: professional networks, government affairs, sector promotion, and talent development. Talent and workforce are frequent topics in all of these areas. Talent is critical to the success of an organization. These changes in the labor force and future talent pipeline are a big focus in the US, especially for tech companies. And we know those tech skills are rapidly changing and evolving, so it's always important to lead discussions on those matters. We conduct a quarterly tech pulse survey, and I wanted to just include some highlights from that to start our conversation today. 70% of respondents expect their businesses to grow in the next quarter. 67% expect to hire in the next quarter. Then 98% of talent hirers say that critical thinking is a top skill they're looking for in their candidates. Then one last stat is that leaders are optimistic about AI growth and advancement over the next 12 months. For additional data on talent and hiring, NC Tech updates a monthly IT job trends dashboard to follow trends in job postings, top skills, certifications and titles, top hiring companies, and wage data for tech positions. We also produce the NC State of the Technology Industry Report, NC STIR for short, which takes a deep dive into where the state ranks in many different areas, such as R&D spending, STEM graduates, women in tech positions, and more. I'll include those links to the data reports I just mentioned in the follow-up email. So that's STIR report and also the pulse survey results. I'll follow up in an email after this. This session is also being recorded, so I will follow up with the recording after this as well. This is a part of our series of Focus on Talent, which is a webinar series we do focusing on issues surrounding talent and workforce development in the tech sector. If you have any suggestions for topics in the future, please reach out to Andrea as well. And I'll share her email in the chat, but it's andrea@nctech.org. For some housekeeping items, if you have any questions in the sessions, we'll be hosting a Q&A at the end of this session. So there's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you type in your questions there, we'll try to address them at the end. And then today's session is hosted by Inspring. Inspring is a new member of NC Tech, and they are an innovator in providing workforce solutions for their clients. So I'm going to pass it to Imran to get us started.
Great. Thanks, Alex, for hosting, and thanks for everyone for being here and spending a few minutes with this group. I'm excited to spend time with this group discussing this really important topic for NC Tech members. So just very quickly about a little bit about myself. I'm co-founder of Inspring. I've been in the higher education and workforce development space my entire career. I'm a first-generation American. Both my mother and father came from overseas to the US for graduate school and kind of became engineers and working in the healthcare industry. And I realized that there's a tremendous amount of talent mobility happening across the world and in the United States. And there were ways to be able to help support talent mobility through innovative solutions. I was on the ground floor of an organization called Shorelight over the course of the previous 10 years. And over that period of time, we were solving a problem for US universities on attracting and retaining diverse talent. So we came up with retention programs and deployed them at across 100 universities across the US and helped support 30,000 diverse talent come to the US, get educated, and graduate with degrees, oftentimes in STEM. And one of the things we found through this experience was that despite their getting a fantastic education at some of the top universities across the country, it was hard to be able to bridge the gap between education and workforce, even in areas like STEM that have tremendous talent shortages across the country. So we created InSpring to be able to help reverse engineer very specific skilled talent pipelines for the healthcare industry, for advanced manufacturing, and for technology to be able to help source, screen, train, and help retain talent for these critical in-demand sectors. So that's a little bit about myself and InSpring. I'll pass it over to Jonathan next.
Awesome. Thank you, Imran, and thank you, Alex, for hosting us. It's a pleasure to be here. And my name is Jonathan Toole. I'm the Associate Manager of Partnerships at InSpring. I'm here within the Carolinas, leading our market to really drive initiatives within retention, on-site mobility, and diversity within the region. Within the Carolinas, you can see that there's a trend of lack of retention and on-site mobility within a lot of operators. So we're going straight on to tackle these challenges and help grow the sector here. I'll pass it over to Paige.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I'm really excited to be here today and really appreciate the invitation. While I'm not in North Carolina, I'm at your friendly South Carolina, right just south of you. Most of my professional experience has been spent in either recruiting and retaining talent and or helping young people on a college campus get hired. And so it's a topic I'm very passionate about. In my former role as director of the Citadel Career Center, I spent a lot of time developing programs to help this pipeline. And now, as Senior Director of Corporate Engagement at our foundation, my job is to create partnerships to help fund either research or scholarship on our campuses. And it's a very collaborative process, and love working with other colleges and entities to help that come to be. So thank you for having me.
Hey, my name is Lee Whitley, and so I own a recruiting firm, Whitley Recruiting Partners. I've been in recruiting my entire career, starting in 2013 with a staffing firm called Insight Global. I then actually worked for a company called Capital Broadcasting Company, which owns a lot of the TV and media entities around town. So I've recruited in a staffing agency platform and also for an internal company, for a bigger company at Capital Broadcasting. And since 2018, I started my own firm. And since 2018, I've recruited teams for big companies like Pendo.io, Bandwidth.com, Lenovo. But I would say the majority of my clients are startups, with 10 to 50 employees. So I've worked for big companies and small companies, and I've seen the good and the bad about recruiting and attracting talent and continuing to always recruit. And so that's my focus. And I really enjoy recruiting, and I enjoy being in Raleigh. It's a good place to be here. Good time.
Awesome. Well, thank you to all the panelists for being here today. I'm excited about this discussion. So we will go ahead and get started with our first question. So the first question is, how can implementing talent pipeline development and community building strategies in K-12 education not only enhance student engagement and academic success, but also contribute to a higher retention rate in the workforce? I think Jonathan's going to kick us off.
Yeah, Alex, I'll take the lead on this one. And I think this is a great question because implementing talent pipeline development and community building strategies in K-12 can have a lot of impacts and benefits extending beyond academic success and student engagement. This is really going to drive the early identification of interests and skills because by implementing these career exploration programs at an early age, it helps students identify all their interests and their skills at an early age. When these students have a clear understanding of their passions and strengths, they're more likely to pursue the careers that align with their interests, leading to a higher job satisfaction and also a higher retention rate within the workforce. And also just helping keep local talent within the state as well.
Any other thoughts there on K2 education, the panel? Great. I did want to mention that Andrea on our team is a great resource if any organizations out there looking to connect with K-12 organizations. She's happy to make that connection for you. She has a lot of great connections. But well, that brings us to our second question. In terms of recruiting a diverse workforce, where do you see companies excelling and where do you think there's room for improvement? And how do we cater to the needs of different generations in our workforce? Imran.
Yeah, Alex, I'm happy to take that one. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think one of the great things about the state of North Carolina is that it's diverse at the core and has been attracting talent and has talent from all walks of life and every type of background. So I think the good thing is that diversity is at the doorsteps of organizations across the state. I think when I think about diversity and multi-generational workforces, I kind of come down to just the brass tacks around the numbers and understand what the needs are and how does diversity help fulfill a commercial need for businesses. So I was looking at some data earlier this morning before our call, and the data suggests that every year there's probably about 100,000 open jobs in tech broadly in the state of North Carolina. The Department of Commerce came out with a worker shortage index to showcase how many available people are there with qualifications for the jobs that are open. And so the North Carolina number is 55. And so for every 100 jobs that are available in the state of North Carolina, there are 55 workers today that are qualified. That is not good. That's probably about in the U.S. kind of matrix of things. That's probably in the bottom third in terms of the size of the workforce matching the size of the economy. So when you look at this, you realize that there are levers that companies have to pull to be able to better support their workforce. And so when I think about what are the sources of available talent out there, you've got one that says, can I take underemployed talent and help them with skilling, reskilling, upskilling to be able to get to their next stage in their careers to be able to help pump more talent into the sector. I have an example of this. We're working with an organization across the border, closer to where you are, Paige, in South Carolina, that is looking to rethink in the advanced manufacturing space how to take manufacturing operators and train them up in maintenance areas to be able to help them actually not just operate the machinery, but also be able to maintain and fix the machinery when it goes down. It increases productivity of the plant, but it also increases the career mobility and pay for the individuals and creates more career pipelines and more talent coming through the stream. And so that's an example where companies are investing in their people to be able to help upskill, reskill, and kind of get them to their next level. When you have a shortage of maintenance techs, for example, that most every state and manufacturing operation is feeling. So you've got the upskilling, reskilling option. You have the ability to attract talent from out of state. The universities do this quite well within North Carolina, but it's really hard for out-of-state talent to be retained in the workforce after they graduate. You have some of the you're gifted with some of the best universities in the world in the state, but part of that is that they've got the entire world to be able to go to after they graduate, and there's a lot of work to be done to retain that talent. But relying on out-of-state talent alone as the lever for building more workforce is hard. Then you have a third area, and an area that I've got some experience in because of my work at Shorelight around bringing in diverse talent, but you have the ability to attract and retain international talent. And so right now, the state of North Carolina attracts about 23,000 international students to its universities, largely for STEM-related degree programs. Today, the retention rate of that population into the workforce is about 1 in 4. So that means you're talking about 15,000 students a year that are getting North Carolina educated and having to return home because the workforce isn't ingesting them into the workforce. And there's a lot of things to be able to be done to be able to do that. But as I kind of look at the spectrum of diversity and multi-generational workforce, I start with the data to understand where the opportunities are, and see a lot of opportunities to better tailor solutions between education and workforce, knowing that one of the greatest attractions into the state of North Carolina is the education, the higher ed system. And there's a lot to be done to be able to help retain that talent better within the state. That's low-hanging fruit that could make impact in the next 12 to 24 months. You don't have to wait a decade for that impact to happen.
Great. Any other thoughts there on that topic? Thanks for those stats, Imran. Those are crazy stats think about. But moving forward, we can talk about technological advancements. What exciting technological advancements should the industry be taking the most notice of, and how do you think they'll impact the way that we work?
Yeah, Alex, I can take this one as well if everybody's okay with that. But you really can't have a conversation about tech today without talking about AI. So I really want to dive in and talk a little bit about robotics and automation, because advances in robotics and automation are really helping to reshape workforce by augmenting human capabilities and also helping perform repetitive and dangerous tasks on day-to-day activities. So industries like logistics, manufacturing, and healthcare are all adapting different types of robots for a lot of automated tasks like warehouse automation, assembly line operations, and even when you go into healthcare, you're having surgical procedures that are done with machinery and AI as well. This helps just really increase efficiency and safety over time, and really take some human aspect out of it that really could just help make everything safe. And another part of technology that I think is really important to talk about as well in today's industry is blockchain technology. The main reason is because blockchain technology today offers secure and transparent ways to record transactions and establish trust in decentralized networks. So when you're looking at industries like finance, supply chain management, and healthcare, they're all exploring different blockchain solutions for reducing fraud, improving transparency, and streamlining processes like asset tracking and identity verification. Typically, this also leads to a high increase in security and just both personal whenever you go to looking into healthcare, like people's records and their healthcare records. It's really just very beneficial.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. So our next question, why do you think having a well-established talent pipeline is crucial for businesses, particularly in terms of recruiting and employee retention?
Yeah. I think that Imran brought up a good point, which is the current state, the present state is that there may not be enough talent. So if you understand that as a leader or a business owner, what are you going to do about that? When you need talent, you need a person, you need to grow your business. Recruiting that person is not something that you should just figure out at the time. That is a continuous problem that needs to be solved. If there is a deficit in talent, and regardless of whether or not there is a deficit, you're always going to need the best people. Your team as a leader or an owner, your team defines you. That's it. And that's how people think about you. That's how you get raises. That's how you actually perform. And if your team isn't up to standards, that's on you as a leader. So what do you do about it? You have to identify and acknowledge that. You need to own the fact that you may not be in HR, you may not be in recruitment, but you are, whether you like it or not. And to actually transition away from recruiting, this is a conversation with finance. This is a conversation with budget. How do you talk to finance about your budget? And how do you take talent acquisition into that conversation? Because what's lost in a budget conversation, which will happen the next 3 or 4 months, what's lost is the amount of time that it takes to recruit, the time that you're not doing your job because you're interviewing people, the loss of money when you don't make the best hire and you have to backfill that person. That's a financial conversation. That's not a recruitment conversation. That's not an HR conversation. However, it's not a financial conversation if you don't have it. That's something that you have to identify. And I think the best leaders that I've ever worked with, they believe that recruitment is their job and they own it. And so if you can always recruit, whether that's you yourself, your network, hiring an agency, it doesn't matter. If you're always recruiting, the gap and the time that it takes for you to bring in someone and to fill that placement, it's going to condense, and that's going to save you money. What's the difference on a scale of 1 to 10? Let's talk about talent. You've got a 7 or a 9. A 9 out of 10, does 2x the value of a 7 out of 10. So what can you do to make sure that you're always hiring 9s and 10s out of 10? The only way you're going to do it quickly and efficiently is to think about it always.
Lee, I'm just going to add, thank you for your passion on that. I had a little note
You're
down
welcome.
here. You know, recruiting is everyone's job. So I just love your passion, your vision for that. And I'm sure we'll get to more of that in the discussion.
Thank you, Paige. Appreciate that.
Yeah, Lee, just to go off of that, I feel like the talent also just wants to be supported. So when you're racing these conversations, having continuous
Correct.
conversations with talent outside and just throughout long periods of time, even diving back to K through 12, they're going to feel supported by these industries and corporations, companies, and are going to be more likely to want to work for these companies. And you'll have more of those 9s and 10s be able to join your workforce.
You're right. I mean, the way that you treat candidates, you either care or you don't. And so if you care, then you care. And yes, I do this all the time. Look, the summer is the slowest time in recruiting. What's funny about that is that because it's so slow, I get more candidates reaching out to me than normal because they're not getting love somewhere else. So what do? You say, hey, well, you're a really good talent. You're the type of person that would be perfect for our organization. We don't have something right now, but you're the type of person that I want to hire. I want you to know that here are our hiring cycles, right? If you're a bigger company, we generally have budget, right? In Q4 or Q1 or Q2, we generally are growing in these areas of the business. Identify that candidate and let them know that. And guess what? They'll remember that. You know why? Because you're different, because no one else is doing it. And that matters to people. And even if you don't make the hire, they'll tell someone else about the experience and they'll feel strongly about your brand and your company. Whether it's your company or you as a leader, it'll work out in your favor.
I want to add something here around kind of this point around kind of always on recruiting, Lee, around retention, and because I think it's just the other side of the coin, right? I mean, I think part of this is you're making a point around the expense and the productivity loss around attrition, and especially if you're like on your heels about it. If you don't see it coming, if you don't expect it, it's going to catch companies on the side, and then you hear the cost. I certainly see it on the healthcare side because I work in that side of the industry too. But like the cost of travel nurses and others, like the nursing attrition issue, the healthcare attrition is like bankrupting hospital systems. But that's happening in different ways within tech and advanced manufacturing as well. I saw a stat on a conversation I was at on a couple months ago. It said if you look like 5 years ago in manufacturing occupations, the average retention was like 20 years within a company. They said that has gone from 20 years to 3 years in a pretty short amount of time. And there was also a stat around the 3-month retention rate used to be 90% in manufacturing, and now it's 50%. So that means the bottom's falling out on the retention piece. And so if you're caught flat-footed on it, you're going to deal with real issues within the organization, which is why I think your points are really important, which is you've always got to look a step ahead and recognize that people are on a career journey. And for the most important roles within your organization, you always have to have a bench ready to go. And if you don't, you're gonna be uncompetitive against others in your space. And so it's a really good point. And I think it's a point where I've seen a lot of innovative organizations now believe in it, subscribe to it, embrace it, and build teams with that philosophy. we're recognizing that there's going to be attrition. If it's planned and managed for, it just becomes part of the business, part of the rhythm of the business.
Agreed. You know, results matter. And if you think that recruiting is not your job, then that's on you. It is your job. That's how you win. Your team defines you ultimately. And you do need to understand that people will fall out. But the reason why people fall out, a lot of that starts before they were even hired. It's all about you as a leader supporting them and being transparent and being someone of value during the entire process. Because the people that work for you, if you are continuously recruiting, they should believe in you before they even start. And I think that you brought up a very good point, and you're right.
It sounds like we've hit on a topic of importance here. And as I was preparing for this too, in case y'all were not familiar, so NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, is really a national organization that most colleges look to for best practices. And I read an article this morning and I wrote a quote down that said, it kind of goes in line with execution eats strategy for breakfast, but it was an employer's brand is shaped by what students tell each other based on their experiences, not by what employers tell themselves. And I have seen that time and time again on college and university campuses. It's, employers feel one way about themselves. And I can think of a lot of, especially large employers in our market, in the Charleston market, who really exude this, get in line, right? You should come work for us. But when a student goes and works in that environment and brings back what it's really like and how they feel, it can totally disrupt a recruiting pipeline that a company has worked a long time to build, either, in a K through 12, a high school, or a college campus.
Great. Well, thank y'all for the great insights there. I think that leads us great into our next question. The pandemic has shifted perspectives on work, especially among younger generations. How can industries adapt to these changes and effectively retain talent and in the post-pandemic landscape?
Well, I will take this one. I'm sure everyone is, especially recruiters and managers, they're kind of sick of talking pandemic talk, but boy, has it shifted everything. And I truly believe that flexible work arrangements are here to stay, at least to some degree. One of the things that I hear a lot from our college students too is companies that have prioritized well-being, mental and physical well-being for their new recruits is of utmost importance. I think it's really, really important. Part of your recruiting strategy is you're onboarding young people who have been through an interesting time, as we all have, but how does that impact their work environment? And so I think I'm seeing companies who are offering wellness programs and mental health support as part of the work-life balance is again, it's one of those things students are bringing back to campus to talk about. And it's energizing them, and it's energizing in them and wanting to go work for those organizations. Also, I have an interesting story. I think a purpose-driven or really a mission-focused company, a company who understands their mission and understands that both millennial and Gen Z, which have really been my focus, are really excited about coming to work for a company that aligns with their values. And so for all of our incoming students for many, many years at the Citadel, students have had to develop a career plan starting freshman year. They don't always remember it, right? But it's really getting them to think and what are their skills, what is their values, what are their interests, and then what do they want, not only out of their degree, but where do they want to be in 4 years? And so we would take this data and we would look at it, and really in the first 3 or 4 years of doing this, high income is a really important goal of a lot of college students. But we saw that shift. And so about 6 or 7 years ago, when I looked at the data on what are our freshmen seeking in their careers, it really was a purpose. I want to go to work for an organization that has a mission, that cares about me, and that I can contribute and have a purpose. And I don't know that a lot of employers realize that. So we would share that with our employers to talk about what is your purpose? Really, is it aligning with the values of what the students have? And so it's almost a shift back from that gig economy where students want to move around to, I want to go work with an organization that is going to value me, that is going to promote me, and is going to recognize my contributions. And so with that, I hear a lot of employers, especially my age and the 50 and above, oh, it's kind of everyone wants a trophy. And that's really not it. I really think students want to be students and young graduates in that 5 to 10 year early career growth. They want recognition. And I don't mean a pat on the back for every single, showing up to work, but really recognizing their contributions is very, very important. It's the feedback that our students have given us. I do think, and you're already mentioning this, effective communication, right? Recruiting is everyone's job. Of course, I'm speaking more about a college campus, but also management is everyone's job. So if you spend all your energy and effort on the front end, developing a talent pipeline and getting your young talent in the door, what are you investing in your mid and upper level management, right? Have you promoted someone just because they've done a good job and then you just assume that they're going to be good managers because they were good employees? Because that's not the case. So I think also investing in management training, which involves teaching your lower and mid-level management effective communication skills, transparency, is incredibly important. So I think that's an investment employers don't always think about, right? Just let's promote good people into that next level of management. Incredibly important post-pandemic, clear communication and supporting your younger workforce.
Paige, I think you have such a great point. And I was reading this stat last week. It was done by Deloitte in the end of 2022. And it mentioned that the top two causes for Gen Z and millennials leaving their current organizations were one, work-life balance, and then the second one, lack of learning and development opportunities within their organization. That came up to about 60% of the people that were surveyed. And whenever you got into different talks like salaries and stuff, those were more around 20%, and a lot lower than all those other statistics.
Yeah, when I was having a conversation a few months ago with a gentleman who's on top of a private equity firm that hires and works with a lot of tech companies, and we were talking about early career, we ended up circling around the same topic, Jonathan, that you're mentioning, and Paige, that you're mentioning around learning and development. And one of the very kind of simple things that he said but stuck with me was that we're taking talent that has spent their entire lives up until that point learning. Every year they're measured based on how much they learn, and we're telling them now suddenly at 22 or 26, whenever they're leaving undergrad or the grad program, suddenly you're in a job and now you're producing and you're kind of doing the same thing every day. But they've been wired since they've been in school, since they've been 5 or 6 years old, just to learn and be stimulated every day when they show up. And it's really intuitive when you kind of think about that and put yourself in that mindset around their learning journey today. And I think it does put a real obligation on the employer and the managers, Paige, to your point, around what am I doing every day to continue to challenge the individuals on my team, because they want to be challenged. That's what they're used to. They're used to being challenged every day when they show up to school, to college, in front of their professors on an exam. They're used to being challenged. So challenge your talent. And if you're not challenging them, you're going to demotivate them. And I think it's a real learning around, whether we go like learning and development is one angle of it, but it really just comes down to like managers' ability and mindset around, am I stimulated, am I challenging people? And I'm going to motivate them to kind of see their career trajectory within that company. And I think those things come far before reward and salaries. Ultimately, when we think about it, once they've chosen a company, what's going to keep them there?
Exactly. People want to know, especially of this younger generation, where am I at?
Mhm.
Where am I at? Because Imran, you talked about, the short longevity, the turnover, those are all facts. And then Paige talked about, how managers need to be understanding that the world that you grew up in before COVID, where is assumed, the assumption is that you will stay at that company for 5 to 15 years. And that's the world that you live in your mind. But what's happened in the last 3 or 4 years, people aren't leaving their jobs necessarily every 18 months. There's been a lot of layoffs. There's been more turmoil in the last 5 years than there was the 15 years prior. And so you have to put yourself in their shoes and understand it's not that they want to quit, but they've been maybe even told or conditioned that, changing is normal and that things are not always as safe. And so people just want to know, where am I at? And as a manager, if you can explain that to them and let them know where they stand, that'll take you a long way.
Awesome. Well, we have one more question and then we'll get to audience Q&A. So the last question we have is, what do you believe are the main obstacles in retaining talent in North Carolina and beyond? And how can we ensure that local talent is aware of and excited about the opportunities available, resulting in less talent attrition out of state and then out of region?
Well, I'll take that one, and I think it ties in nicely as a closer to what we're talking about. But I'm sure in the RTP area, as in Charleston here, there's a perception of a limited job market. And so, where you have the larger research universities in major cities where obviously talented individuals are wanting to go because they believe that there's more growth opportunities. I think organizations, geographical areas who have a hard time with retention overall do have a marketing problem. We face that some here in South Carolina, being a smaller state, is that what are the opportunities long term? Obviously the elephant in the room, and Jonathan, you mentioned this, is that housing and salary limitations are something that we are certainly dealing with here in South Carolina. I know that some of the more rural areas in North Carolina probably face that as well. I have found the companies that do really well with these types of obstacles, like retaining talent, often are ones that do a really good job of creating community engagement within their local markets. And that retention often, it can't be reactive. It can't be that you're coming in on a college campus when you're looking to hire. It is, are you engaging in K through 12? Are you in the classrooms? Are you working with your technical schools to build training programs? Boeing has done a good job with that here in the Charleston area. And then are the organizations, both the technical schools and industry, working with colleges and universities to create pipelines for certificate and evening undergraduate and graduate programs to keep that talent? I want all of our engineers and business and our young talent to stay in the Charleston market. I think organizations, and I talked about investing in that younger and mid-level management. I think companies that are doing a really good job retaining their talent are companies that I've seen developing strong mentoring programs and networking opportunities internally for their young talent, are often ones that retain it. And I can really think of two companies right off the top of my head that I've worked with for almost 15 years in the Charleston market. And when young alumni reach out to me and they're looking to make a change, and we look at, what are the reasons you're looking to leave, right? You don't want to be running from something. You want to be going towards something in career development. And I look at, there are a handful of companies, and really two in particular that I think of, have not only recruited our young talent, but have retained them, have promoted them, and then have really recognized them, for being strong managers. And those are the people that they send back to our campus to recruit. And so you also spoke about something earlier, is that skills mismatch. I think when you're looking at hiring, again, and I'm really focused on the K through 12 or technical and college recruiting, is that if you're recruiting on a college campus and you have got this extensive requirement, right, is that you're looking for all of these things. It's a 2-page job description that requires 2 to 3 years of experience, but we'll hire a college student. A college student is not going to apply for that. There's a huge mismatch in perhaps what you think you're recruiting for versus what a young recruit is seeing. So I think, again, that goes back to clear communication, and then working with the resources that you have to make sure you're connecting with the right people.
Great. Well, we do have one audience question already. So if anyone else would like to submit anything in the Q&A function down below, feel free to do so. But we already have one, and I can go ahead and pose that question. It's a good question. In a situation where new team members' actual skill set does not align with what was initially advertised, and considering the significant investment already made into their training and development, what strategies would you recommend for enhancing their productivity? Additionally, how would you determine the appropriate time to consider looking for an alternative talent?
I'm
feel
happy
like-
to, yeah, Jonathan, go for it.
Yeah, I was going to say one way to look at it is just really conducting maybe a skill gap analysis. So assessing like which current skills the team member and really identify the specific areas where they fall short, and then maybe have targeted training programs to provide for those different bridge gaps, and also just having clear goal settings and then just feedback. So making sure you set goals or maybe like time periods to where you do periodic check-ins with them and seeing how that progress is going over time.
I would probably add, oops, excuse me, Imran, I would add that from the corporate side, I would see this as a misalignment, right? Is that you weren't hiring for the right position. However, often what happens here, and each one of us has seen it, and probably the people logging on here have seen this, is I made the wrong hire. And instead of addressing it immediately, maybe within 1 or 2 weeks of a new hire, and trying to get that new hire and all the energy and effort you put into hiring that new employee into a right area, it's really often a wait. Let's just wait it out, right? Let's wait and see what happens. And then you have, again, that's internal misalignment where that employee is not going to be happy, where you spend a lot of energy and effort recruiting and a lot of wasted time and money. That goes back to good management, right? How is a manager addressing that? How can you get that person into the right place in the organization instead of waiting it out and just waiting perhaps until that person would leave? I see that happen a lot. I know all of you recruiters do as well. And that's just the worst case scenario that you want to avoid.
I totally agree, Paige. The only point I was going to add to something, Jonathan, that you'd said was that, you can probably tell from everyone on this call that I'm a data-driven guy. And I think you have to bring objectivity to any of these situations. And so we certainly do a lot of quantitative assessments in addition to the qualitative before someone starts. But I also find that tools like the Gallup Strengths Finder is something I've used across multiple organizations. And sometimes I feel like you just have to play to people's strengths. I'm a believer in starting there. You've got to create some quick wins. And so for the person who asked the question, I think you've got to find some wins. If this person's going to be successful in your organization, you got to figure out, is there a way to get some wins on the board to build their confidence up in something that they can do to contribute and add value to your org. And I think understanding objectively through tools like the Strengths Finder or others, what some of those things are, and then seeing how you can align some of those strengths to things your organization needs. And I'd say most organizations need a lot of things. And so there's usually an ability to be able to look at someone's core strengths and align them. But it goes back to Paige, your point, which is that takes real management. That's a commitment, and it's more than just kind of cookie cutter solutions. You actually have to customize how you're thinking about this as almost like a business problem, but a business problem that has to be solved, because if it's not just this one individual, it's actually going to continue to happen because people don't always fit into a box or a job description. You're dealing with a kind of a dynamic individual with strengths and growth opportunities, and you're trying to figure out a way how to align those strengths with things that are mission critical for the company.
All right. Well, thanks for y'all's insights there. We have another question, and it's kind of a two-parter. So one, Imran, can you restate the 100,000 stat and the info about young grads leaving the state? And then the second kind of follow-up to that is, Jonathan, do you think AI is going to make it easier for a job candidate to qualify for a job, or harder to qualify for a job if they have not been trained in AI? So Imran, I'll let you restate the stat if you can, if you remember it off the top of your head, and then we can jump to Jonathan after that.
I'm actually gonna, if I can, I think I can type answers, and I don't know, I think this hopefully goes to everybody, but I'm just gonna point to the data so that everyone has it. There's a comp TIA report that's called the State of the Tech Workforce, and it breaks down state by state metrics. And so the actual specific stat I have it written down is 103,000 open jobs in tech and engineering fields in North Carolina in 2023. And there's another link that I had available for those that were interested, and I will kind of put it under the, I wanted to answer it. Let me see if I can type it here. I'll add another link, which is the North Carolina U.S. Chamber of Commerce labor shortage link that kind of points to the 55% data point that I was sharing around available talent in the state. So I recommend folks reading those. I find these to be quite helpful and kind of just pointed around where some of the talent shortages are and what are some of the things to consider as you're building up your workforce.
And then for Dana, for my answer to your question, I feel like it's very subjective to which kind of position or role you're going to be hiring for. So some roles are going to be maybe more data analytical, and you might want someone that's more trained within AI. But all around, I feel like there's a very specific human element just when it comes to hiring somebody, and you really need to dive down into that human element to find out if that's the right person you want for your organization, and in the long run, if they're going to work out. So I feel like being trained in the AI, as of right now, it's not very hard to get trained in some of these AIs, but it really depends on what specific AI you're working with, what the role is going to be, and also your organization as a whole. Like, is your team going to be using AI on a daily basis, or is it going to be something maybe for a specific project?
Great. I think that's all the questions we have as of now from the audience, but I will let everyone maybe do some closing kind of parting thoughts, just maybe go around the bend, and mention, one takeaway or one call to action on attracting talent and retaining talent. There's kind of one big idea that you want to impart kind of as a closing thought.
I feel for me, one of the biggest things is really just diving into those K-12 communities and really diving into for corporations to get involved with younger talent and younger generations to be able to show interest. And then even on the other side of that, the younger talent will be able to tell you and show you that, hey, I could be interested in this in the future, and this is something that I would like to do. Eventually being able to lead to more longer retainable people within your company, and also reduce just attrition.
That's great, Jonathan. I'll add my biggest takeaway, and I think we're preaching to the choir with this panel, but recruiting is everyone's job. It doesn't just fall on the recruiters or the HR, which are often looked to solve the problem. it's everyone's job. And, you know, speaking from a college campus recruiting strategy it's also everyone's job, right? And you've got to start early. So our engineering talent, we're a small college, we have a very low supply and a high demand. And typically with I'll just use it as our engineering recruiting events as an example, typically physically getting someone on campus late by junior or senior years, our students are already hired. So we try to start that hiring process freshman year and sending the right people to a college campus, developing the right relationships with both a career center and faculty and the leadership is very, very important. And those are the ones that we see the greatest success with.
I'm happy to go next to close out. Thanks everyone for being here. I learned a term when I was in my higher ed role around armchair recruiting, and it was the thing not to do. And it kind of based on kind of the discussion here today, it's kind of one of my takeaways, which is kind of armchair recruiting is something of the past, and you've really got to go out and get in your community and get in your workforce to understand what's happening. And it is everyone's job, and it's the hiring manager's job, it's the VP of engineering's job, as much as it is everyone who's kind of directly rolling into HR or TA functions. And I do think that, Paige, you mentioned that, you know the two companies in the region that are the most proactive, and you're going to think about them first when you think about some of your top engineering talent. And those two companies have probably done a lot to reach into the community, into the system, and that's the way to succeed. And so I think about this is a moment in time to be able to kind of think differently, looking ahead, put away the historic world of armchair recruiting and get out into your workforce, have the conversations, and get out into the community.
Yeah. There are things you can control and things that you cannot. Your company's technology, the pricing, your competitors, you can't control that. But what you can control is the team that you surround yourself with. So just own that and enjoy it, because frankly, recruiting is really fun, and having the best team possible, even though you may not think it's your job, having the best team possible, it'll make your life better. You'll sleep better. You'll be happier. So just own it because you can control it. It's great.
Awesome. Well, thank you to all the panelists for such an awesome discussion today. I think there's a lot of great nuggets of information we got. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you to InSpring for sponsoring the session, and Ron and Jonathan have been awesome hosts. And thank you for Paige and Lee for joining us today. But as I mentioned before, I will be sharing the link to this recording. You can also reach out to me or Andrea Fleming directly with any questions about NC Tech, our talent programming, and then just kind of any logistical information you need. But on that, I will say everyone have a great rest of your week, and thank you all for being here. Thank you.